Good morning, everybody. My name is Ilana Schneider. I'm the Executive Director of Canada-Israel Friendship Association. And on behalf of the association, together with my colleague Evgenia Rachevsky, we would like to welcome you to the third annual Israel Truth Week. Before I introduce the founder of Israel Truth Week, there are a couple of housekeeping matters to get out of the way. First of all, I would like to thank all our volunteers who contributed their time and energy to make this event possible. Thank you very much. A very special thanks goes to Mark Vandermaas for entrusting our organization in helping him put this event together. It is an honor. A very special thanks goes to our community partners, of whom there are too many to mention, but they're all listed on the agendas that you can find on your tables. So please take a moment to read through it and come up to them during the break and say hello. And finally, a very special thanks goes to this year's esteemed speakers for donating their time and insight to this very important event. Their generosity of spirit cannot be understated. I would like to finish with a personal message, if I may. At the time when the Middle East is literally going up in flames, when the death toll in Syria now stands at over 140,000, when 2.5 Syrians are displaced, when girls are shot in the head in Pakistan for wanting nothing more than basic education, when Christians are persecuted all over the Middle East, when women's and gay rights are all but non-existent in most Muslim countries, when 500 people were executed in Iran last year, and 57 of those death sentences were carried out in public, a group of so-called pro-Palestinian students got together at the University of Ottawa and concluded that of all the most unimaginable horrors happening today in the Middle East, the world's biggest human rights violator of all is Israeli hummus. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. According to the Palestinian Solidarity Group, this type of hummus is practically a war criminal. Not Assad, not the Iranian regime, or Hamas, Hezbollah, or Islamic Jihad, but a type of hummus made in Israel. The same Israel, by the way, which quietly treated 800 Syrian war casualties, which continues to supply Gaza with food, medicine, and electricity, even as rockets are raining down from Gaza on Israeli civilians. The astonishing hypocrisy of the so-called pro-Palestinian poseurs, with their keffiyehs and posters of Arafat over their beds, and their hummus boycotts and Gaza flotillas, would be laughable if it wasn't hypocritical and downright dangerous. Because remember that today's students that harass Jewish students at York, that disrupt pro-Israel speakers at Concordia, and that honor Palestinian terrorists at U of T could be tomorrow's professors, journalists, or, God forbid, politicians. You may remember that in 2005, Israel Apartheid Week, an anti-Israel monstrosity, was hatched in Toronto for the first time. And while the Jewish community leaders were reassuring us that it is nothing more than a radical fringe event, and if it's ignored, it will just go away, this monstrosity has now metastasized to 130 cities around the world. You don't have to be a Jew or a Zionist to stand up to anti-Israel bullies. You just have to be human. And if you still ask yourself a question, why should I care about Israel? A tiny Jewish homeland the size of New Jersey, halfway around the world. Well, the answer to that came from a very unlikely source. A left-wing Spanish politician by the name of Pilar Raola. She said, "I am not Jewish. Ideologically, I'm left, and by profession, a journalist. Why am I not as anti-Israel as my colleagues? Because as a non-Jew, I have the historical responsibility to fight against hatred of the Jews and against hatred of their historic homeland. To fight against anti-Semitism is not the duty of the Jews. It is the duty of the non-Jews. As a journalist, it is my duty to search for the truth beyond prejudice, lies, and manipulations. The truth about Israel is not told. As a person from the left who loves progress, I am obligated to defend liberty, culture, civic education for children, coexistence, and the laws that the tablets of the covenant made into universal principles, principles that Islamic fundamentalism systematically destroys. That is to say that as a non-Jew, journalist, and lefty, I have a triple moral responsibility to Israel. Because if Israel is destroyed, liberty, modernity, and culture will be destroyed too. The struggle of Israel, even if the world doesn't want to accept it, is the struggle of the world. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Israel Truth Week and this afternoon's MC, Mark van der Maas.
You know, as Ilana said, there are just far too many people to thank for today. This doesn't just happen because of me. All the wonderful volunteers and presenters and exhibitors. There's some donors. So I'll just leave it. I do have to thank Ilana and Canada-Israel Friendship Association. Without them, I can absolutely tell you with 100% certainty that this event would have been a far lesser or a far more mediocre event were it not for their involvement. And I think you're going to see why as the day goes on. I can't tell you how overwhelmed I am and the excitement that's been building. You know, last year we had 21 speakers over 2 days, and this year we're trying to do it all in one day on a Sunday so more people can attend. And so we're gonna have a busy day today. But I have a little housekeeping to do myself. There are some journalists here that are filming at the front here. Is there anybody in the room that has any objection to being filmed today? Anybody at all? Well, that's awesome. That's great. Thank you very much. So it's now on the record. I don't see anybody putting up their hand. Much appreciated. And they're working on, I think, a television show. And in that vein, I will tell you that Doris Epstein of Shalom Toronto called me Friday. Apparently they're starting a new show, it'll be an online television show, and she asked me to be one of the first guests, and I'll be doing a half-hour spot on April the 9th. I'll talk to you about this year's theme because it's an important one and what it's all about in a few minutes after we play our national anthems. But first I'd like to share a video greeting to you by a really unique lady. She's a non-Jewish student at the University of New Orleans. Her name is Chloe Valderi, and if you Google that name, you'll find she's becoming something of a superstar in Israel advocacy. And Front Page magazine recently said this about Chloe Valderi. In addition to being featured by the Jewish press, BET.com, Breitbart.com, the Jerusalem Post, among others, Allgemeiner named Ms. Valderi one of the top 100 people positively affecting Jewish and Israeli life. And she recorded a greeting for us at the Israel Truth Week conference. So, if you would, Lev.
Shalom. Congratulations on this year's Israel Truth Week. You have all convened in one place at one time for a very special noble cause, the cause of Zionism. I do not have to explain to you how this movement has been slandered and dragged through the mud. You are already well aware. I do not have to illustrate to you how Zionism has been denigrated and turned into something ugly, especially on college campuses, both here and in the West in general. Throughout this week, I want you to remember who it is that you are and what it is you stand for. I implore you to remember the millions of Jews exiled from their homes over the centuries and the great triumph of Zionism that was an answer to that. Remember the Maccabees and their great struggle for liberty. They have passed on that struggle to you. When you are on campus and you find yourself surrounded with those that have malice in their hearts towards you and your people, remember that your cause is a noble one. Indeed, it is just. The spirit of King David and Queen Esther resides within you. So may this week empower you, may it inspire you, and may you go from strength to strength.
You can thank Alana Schneider of Canada-Israel Friendship Association for that. Actually, you can leave the lights down, Rafi, if you would, please. Before we stand for the Hatikva and O Canada, I'd like to say a few words about the Israeli anthem that you're going to see and hear in a minute. It is a BBC recording of Hatikva from April 20th, 1945, of Jewish survivors of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, only 5 days after their liberation by Allied forces. The words are sung from the original text by Hertz Imber.
Yisrael Chai, the children of Israel still liveth.
Thank you. The 2012 and 2013 Israel Truth Week conferences were both held in Christian churches. This is the very first time that the conference has taken place in a synagogue, and we are very pleased that it is here in a shul started by Holocaust survivors. And I'm honored to have past President Raphael Remez to say a few words, if he would, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my shul, the Lodzer Synagogue. I'm the immediate past president, and we have another president, Judy Chazan, here with us. Full of presidents. It's a presidential affair here. Those of you who know the history of Lodz, it was a vibrant city in Poland, the second largest in Poland, with a population of over 210,000 Jews. A mere 10 to 15,000 survived. It was the second largest ghetto after Warsaw. 60 years ago, 4 friends, survivors of the Holocaust, came here. They had a dream to organize a society called the Lodzer Society. It was a mutual society. Within a few months, the founding members were raised to a number of 90 families and became the mutual society, benefit society of the Lodzer Center. In 1962, a monument was built in the honor of the society's loved ones at the Bathurst Lawn cemeteries, standing there today. Over the next decade, through the generosity of members, they sent, and I said that to the gentleman on the side, 9 ambulances to Israel. Small little congregation of 90 families. I have to dig up the picture downstairs. It's one of the old ambulances. I said to him it was like a rickshaw back then, but they were old ambulances, box ambulances. I was in Israel then in the 60s, and I remember it very well. Didn't know where Lodz was, didn't know where this congregation was. I didn't know Canada existed. In 1981, this beautiful building that stands today was erected. No longer a vision, but a home for the survivors, their children, and the community at large. The Lodzer Center Holocaust Congregation, a shul built in the memory of the victims of the Shoah, was born. Today, we're a vibrant, egalitarian, conservative synagogue with daily minyans and ongoing cultural events. Please Google us, look for the events, and join us. You will have a chance today to walk away with the truth from here today. The truth about Israel, my homeland. You have the power to communicate to several 100,000 people here. And I mentioned that yesterday in the synagogue downstairs. Aisha Torah has the phenomenal ability to tell us to use every technology possible. I see 200 people here. We know at least a couple of thousand people. Send them the emails. I don't care if they delete them, but some will continue. It will hit several 100,000 people. The wonders of the internet. I urge you to do so we can all say one more time, never again. Thank you.
Now, about this year's theme, truth before solutions, safeguarding the honor of the Jewish people. The 2014 Israel Truth Week conference honors a great scholar and a champion of Israel's land rights under international law, the late attorney Howard Grief, who dedicated 25 years of his life to researching, documenting, and sharing an inconvenient truth that, contrary to the prevalent narrative of occupation and stolen land, modern Palestine was actually created to reconstitute, quote, the national home for the Jewish people under international law via the 1920 post-World War I San Remo Conference and the subsequent 1922 League of Nations mandate for Palestine, and that land promised to Jews east of the Jordan River was given instead to Arabs in what is now Jordan. And you'll hear various educators this afternoon give you more details about that. And this original two-state solution means that Jewish people are owners, not occupiers, of Judea and Samaria, by virtue of a land title deed from the world community that explicitly, you can read the document yourself, encouraged them to create communities in all of Palestine. I'm talking about your land title deed. It's right here. You can download it off the internet. Your programs include a web address at israeltruthweek.org where you can download an original copy of your land title deed, the mandate for Palestine. And there are some explanatory notes with it in the document that were prepared with assistance from Salomon Ben Zimra, the co-founder of Canadians for Israel's Legal Rights, CILR. There's a table here. You can go visit them. Now, Salomon, who worked very closely with Howard Grief when writing his own book, The Jewish People's Rights to the Land of Israel, will speak this afternoon with some other colleagues of Howard's. But in the meantime, I'm really pleased and honored to tell you that we have 3 members of Howard Grief's family with us today. And there's Tikva, his sister-in-law, and we have Eric Grief, and forgive me, I can't remember the last name, but Tikva and Eric are going to come up and they're going to offer you just a few words of insight into Howard's life.
I would like to thank Mark and the organizers who give me the opportunity to speak a few words about my brother-in-law, Howard Grief. My sister Ilana is his wife. How did they meet? Sometimes I believe that God works in mysterious ways. We are Israelis, right-wing family. We had a member in our family who was in the Etzel at the time. My sister Ilana, I invited her for 2 years to come to Montreal. She worked as a teacher in Talmud Torah school in Montreal. And she heard about a speaker who was going to speak about Ze'ev Jabotinsky. What does she do? In a horrible cold weather night, she goes to hear the speaker. Who does she meet there? Howard Grief. They got connected. Howard was pro-Israel, and my sister and family, we are pro. My family comes from Persia, Iran, from Hamadan city nowadays, but at ancient time it was called Shushan. Every Friday there were pogroms from the Muslims, and the Jewish people suffered terribly. There was a rabbi in Shushan in Hamadan at the time, he heard about Balfour Declaration at 1917, that the Jewish people have a homeland in Palestine. He decided he cannot and he does not want to suffer anymore. He asked the Jewish community there, whoever wants to make an aliyah with me to go to Palestine, to our homeland, come and join me. My mother and my father, they were teenagers at the time, young teenagers. They were not happy there. They decided to move with the community. They walked by foot 6 months from there to Palestine. My father, as a young 17 boy, he was held in prison because he entered the country illegally. So they lived there, they got married, and they had their children, which is one of them, Ilana, the youngest in the family. And Howard, who was in Montreal as a lawyer and a notary, fell in love with my sister. They got married in Jerusalem, and he made a promise that he would make an aliyah one day. After they had their 2 sons, Ariel and Elad, they made an aliyah. Howard was a very humble person, a very good person. He loved people, he helped people. And all what he has in his mind was the idea of the land of Israel for the Jewish people, for the Israelis. He worked very hard on his book. My sister Ilana, she took care of him in many ways. All he had to do to write the book, to concentrate on what he was doing. And that's what he did. He was a devoted husband, a devoted father, and a very, very good man. I'm so proud to be his sister-in-law. I never knew that Howard was so big in his mind to write this kind of a book. Yehi Zichro Baruch, blessed be his memory.
Who was Howard Grief? He was a wonderful uncle to me. He was many things more. My first memory of my Uncle Howard was when I was maybe 5, and he would come over and visit our home and spend time with my late father, or my father then. My father was his eldest brother, and he would pick me up and he would toss me into the air, and my head was so close to the ceiling. Anyways, when you're 5, you remember that. Ever since then, my Uncle Howard was in my life on regular intervals. When I was 9, he encouraged me and my twin brother, who can't be here today, but to join Beitar. And I think most of you know what Beitar means, Zionist group. Zion is not a dirty word. Zion is a word to be proud of. So my Uncle Howard introduced me to Zionism at an early age. And after that, later on, he founded, the Canadian part of Techia, which means revival of the rights of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. So I was attending some of these meetings with my Uncle Howard. And then my Uncle Howard was interested in going to Israel to live there, and he was talking about this on a regular basis, and that influenced me. And so he took 1 year of Hebrew at McGill University in preparation for his move to Israel, and I followed suit. I took 1 year of Hebrew and as additional education for myself, and we had the same teacher, in fact, at McGill University. And then, the teacher was comparing me to my Uncle Howard, telling me that I was better than he was in Hebrew anyhow. But my Uncle Howard was a well-spoken, well-written man, honed his craft over many years as a lawyer. And anyways, when I went to Israel, my Uncle Howard suggested I bring the book Exodus to read, and it might be meaningful for me to do so, and I did. And so after that, then I saw my Uncle Howard about 3 years ago, and I spoke with him 2 or 3 times, and I was glad that I did. So I have very good memories of my Uncle Howard. And I'm very happy that Mark and the rest of the people who organized today, are honoring my late Uncle Howard. Thank you very much.